What's up YouTube? It's Nerdy and welcome back to the Transmissions Draft League. Today we've got another weekly recap. Now let me just take a sip while I check when the last weekly recap was put out. So the week 2 recap went out nearly 3 weeks ago, which I don't know if you noticed, but that means that these have not been weekly. And if you can see the schedule in front of you, also know that we have a few scattered games here. So what the heck is going on? Well, week 3 just finally completely wrapped up all of their games, and I wanted to let you know what the heck has been going on since then. We've got kind of a mid-season recap, kind of a week 3 recap. There's a lot going on here, but let's go ahead and get into it. So what happened was the California Cubones, actually I did manage to find a replacement coach. We now have the Tapu Coca-Colas, coached by 616. Welcome back to the league. He has made a ton of trades, and we will go over what that roster looks like, as well as other trades that were made in the interim. And then we will also talk about the matchups that have happened week 3, week 4, and then the few week 5 matchups rather that has happened. And then finally, we are also going to talk about the other two teams that have dropped out since. So let's actually go in reverse order there. First up, we are going to talk about the two teams that dropped. We had one from each division, and that's going to be the New York Poke Rangers, coached by Adalov. Unfortunately, they have dropped out. Teams that are playing against them, as usual, get a free week there, a win, and a +2 to their differential. And then the other team dropping out is the Cream City Milkers, coached by Dale. Same deal there. If you play against them over the course of the rest of the season, free win, +2 to your differential. So both of those teams, unfortunately, going to miss out on the playoff race, which does mean that a couple of these divisions do get a little bit more clear. And yeah, I do think though that it's still going to be quite competitive. 4 weeks in, and we still have a pretty tight playoff race between the 5 remaining teams. I think you can pretty realistically say that a couple of teams are probably out of the race, but they're not mathematically eliminated by any stretch. They do probably have to win out in order to make it, but that's how the dice rolls. That being said, there were a few trades that were made, so let's go ahead and check our document here. I have a list of the trades that were made, so let's go ahead and start with, of course, the trades that 616 made. So this team got a really big overhaul. The only 3 Pokemon that stayed were Tapu Koko, Politoed, and Mega Swampert. And what that means is that the Pokemon that were dropped were Iron Valiant, Raikou, Iron Moth, Toxtricity, Barraskewda, Rotom-Frost, and Roserade. So that is a huge portion of the team that is completely overhauled. The pickups that they made were Kartana, absolutely great pickup in my opinion, Iron Jugulus, Kingdra, I love that Pokemon, Gothorita, Hitmonlee, Crawdon, and Butterfree. Now I think this team is actually really solid. The one thing that I'd give this team as a knock, there's 2 things. The first one is Crawdon. I don't think this Pokemon's really ever going to see play. Butterfree, you can maybe talk yourself into Compound House Sleep Powder every now and then, but not really going to be a huge impact. But it's only 2 points, so you know, you're just trying to get some amount of contribution out of that Pokemon. As for Crawdon, that Pokemon's, I believe, 3 points, and although it's a really strong water type attacker and you do have Rain, you already have Mega Swampert, and that Pokemon gets a secondary stab. So although you can make Crawdon immune to Intimidate, I don't think that that is the Pokemon that I would have picked for 3 points. much better choice in my opinion would have been Riolu, as that Pokemon can set up rain using Prankster instead of an ability to set that up. Plus it also gets Prankster coaching, which is really good for your two physical threats in Kartana and Mega Swampert. The only other thing that I dislike about this team is that you did lose a lot of the teeth that Electric Terrain had. I believe that maybe Raikou could have stayed on this team, or potentially a different Pokemon on the cheaper side that also learns Rising Voltage. At the moment, it's really just Tapu Koko using its own terrain. Iron Jugulis could potentially get a speed boost from it. And then, of course, Hitmonlee gets that Unburden boost from Electric Sea. So, not the end of the world, but definitely going to be missing out on that a little bit. I would have liked to see at least one Rising Voltage user stay on the team. As for the rain element of this team, Kingdra I think is a hugely underrated Pokemon. And yeah, the rest of this team does strike a little bit of fear. Of course, I think there are still some growing pains that 616 had. And unfortunately, learning the team at the midpoint of the season does mean that you are a little bit behind. But I think that 616 can turn it around and at least be knocking on the door for a playoff spot. If not, he might sneak into that last spot. I do think that JKG and Totter have their 2 spots locked up, but that 3rd spot is still pretty wide open. Tensor, 616, and Rose Mountain can all get that spot in my opinion. Now there were a couple of other trades that were made as well. Celadon finally making a trade using that last pick and the 2 points available to him. The Pokemon that he picked up in Latias is now out. Walking Wake is in, so taking advantage of Totter missing that Pokemon. I think that's a great pick. Obviously you only had 1 trade to make, but I do think that this is one of the more impactful ones. You at least get rid of one of your Psychic type Pokemon so that you only have 5 instead of 6 now. And Walking Wake does give you a higher speed tier and another thing to do. It doesn't necessarily need the sun, although that does give it its highest threshold of power. I do think that this team would have benefited from something like a really low tier Vulpix or something of the like in order to really boost Delphox's damage in the sun while also still being able to use the Psychic terrain, and then Walking Wake of course also benefits from that sun. But yeah, I think this team has gotten a slight improvement from the trade, and I think that Celadon at least has a shot at that last playoff spot. It is a little bit less of a tight race. Of course, my team and Invisible's team are pretty far ahead at this point, and Tasenda, despite only playing 3 weeks, is still undefeated. So look out for that team also making the playoffs. I do think that Tasenda still has to play the other 2 coaches in the playoffs, as well as Celadon. So there is still a potential for Tasenda to be knocked out of the playoffs, but they have a pretty decent lead at this point. So both Pixie and Celadon have to work hard to get that last spot. But speaking of the Bewears, we have made a couple of trades as well. So we have dropped 2 of the Pokemon that we have not yet used, and honestly it was partially because I didn't really see ourselves ever using those Pokemon. So we got rid of both Aegislash and Palmot. Aegislash really had its best matchup versus Celadon in our opponent not having any Ghost Resist and a ton of Ghost Weaknesses. And it was also pretty decent into Tensor's team, where it was pretty slow and really only feared the Ursaluna. And yet, even in that situation, we didn't end up using it. So there really wasn't a situation where I did see ourselves using it. And as for Palmot, I think the unfortunate fact is that that Pokemon needs the Focus Sash. And on a Tyranitar team, if you're not sand immune, you cannot be reliant on the Sash, and that's just kind of the case for Palmot. So we did end up dropping that Pokemon. However, the 2 Pokemon we got in their spot, I think are going to be insanely impactful going forward. So the first one is Iron Valiant. This Pokemon's insane. We didn't really have threatening fairy damage or really threatening special damage at all. And I think Iron Valiant does provide that, but it also has an insanely deep move pool. I think we are going to actually struggle with the fact that it is a 4 move slot syndrome Pokemon, because the amount of support and coverage that it can provide is really great. One of the things that I really look at with this Pokemon is both Wide Guard and Coaching, both really good support moves that really support this team in a way that we didn't really have before. Of course, Palmot could run Coaching, but with Iron Valiant, it's a little bit more consistent. And although this Pokemon might also want the Focus Sash, it's not totally reliant on it like Palmot was, because it can run something like Booster Energy to outspeed our opponent's entire team, which is yet another element that this team desperately needed. Is our speed tiers are kind of off. If we're not outspeeding everybody, we are kind of just losing the speed wars. We don't really have Tailwind as an option. Iron Valiant at least provides us another option without just slapping on a Choice Scarf onto something like Dracovish. The last Pokemon that we added was Nihilego, and like I mentioned, we don't really have special damage. Nihilego is the special damage. The other amazing thing is that it also gets the special defense boost from the Sandstorm, meaning that it actually tanks special hits relatively well, so it's not going to immediately drop to something like an Earth Power. That being said, it is also a pretty fast Pokemon, which in the correct circumstances we can boost after getting some KOs, and I think that's really valuable for a Pokemon like Nihilego, where it can really start to snowball. I do expect both of these Pokemon to get some use, and I think that they're going to be insanely useful at that as well. So hopefully we get to see those coming up. I do think that they have a couple of good matchups, including our Week 5 matchup coming up here soon. So look forward to that. But let's now go ahead and check the schedule. Like I said, we had all of our Week 3 games wrap up here just a bit ago. And based on that, we got everything but 2 right. And the only 2 that we got wrong were the droppings out of our 2 buddies there. One of them, of course, Ninja Fusion did end up beating the Cream City Milkers before they dropped out, but we did get that one incorrect. And then I did pick the Poke Rangers against LAC, and they did drop out. Going forward, I'm going to also consider them a free win in my predictions, but I do think that I think it's worth counting them as incorrect in my predictions for Week 3. Looking forward, we had one game, Week 5 game already wrap up, and then we had 2 of our non-bye week Week 4 games wrap up. Myself and Totter getting the win in those 2 games. Pretty dominant in both of them. Totter did get a little bit lucky in that first game, but wow, Mega Charizard is on a roll, and we'll see if that dominance continues to kind of burn through the opposition. And as for us, although we were really heavily reliant on Dracovish in these 2 games, Dracovish not a huge factor in this game, and the rest of the team really showed up. So showing that we have multitudes, and hopefully the Bewears will continue to roll looking at playoffs, because I do think we actually have really good matchups in the cross-divisional games, so hopefully we'll be able to show up there. Here are your standings after all of the bye weeks have been calculated, as well as the games played up to Week 5. Week 6 is starting here today, actually, as I record this. So everybody who has to wrap up Week 4 and 5 games, I'm not going to be stingy about it. It's a holiday season, and Obviously, we had a few people drop out, so it is going to be harder. Um, but you know, with finals wrapping up and with everybody's getting ready for the cozy time in the holidays, we will have a little bit of a break after the season wraps up to enjoy the holidays, and then we will do some post-holidays playoffs. Your playoff teams right now, if the playoffs started today, are the Mount Silver Spectres and Ludicolo's getting the #1 seed, Bewears and the Charge Beams getting the 2 seeds, and then the Litwicks and the 10-star team getting that 3 seed. Like I said, it is a pretty tight race in both divisions for those last spots, but the other two I believe are pretty locked up between um, the Spectres and the Charge Beams, as well as the Ludicolos and the Bewears. I think those are pretty locked up, and it's kind of just a race for the 1 and 2 seeds, respectively, in each of those divisions. But yeah, um, be sure you continue to cheer on your favorite teams going forward. Um, yeah, I do think that we are looking at a lot of really good games coming up. I think one to look for in both week 5 and week 6 that has yet to resolve. I think this Silver Spectres versus the Coca-Colas is an underrated classic, as well as My Game versus Descenda. That should be a really high-powered matchup. Descenda still has their week 4 game to play, but if everything goes as I predicted, they're still going to be undefeated heading into this match, and that should be a really heavyweight bout right there. In week 6, obviously you can look at the battle of the 2 seeds here, but I think the shout out goes to the 10-star team versus Ninja Fusion. This should be a really fun match because both of these teams are on the edge of playoffs. 10-star team currently does hold the playoff spot, but I do think that both the Sunset Rose Meowsticks and the Tapu Coca-Colas can push into that spot if Tensor doesn't really tighten up their play going into the last few games. Um, but yeah, that is what I have for you for the recap. Hopefully there is a lot of good stuff to look forward to. Hopefully you are excited, and that trash in the back is unfortunately all of the garbage we are taking out from the trades. I packed in Latias, Palma, and Aegislash in there, so hopefully those Pokemon are nice and comfortable for their run out to the garbage. But that's all I have for you for today. Like I said, cheer on your favorite teams and cheer on your Manchester Bewears as we make our playoff run. And I will see you next time. Bye bye.